Hi guys, this is a rehash of a live tweet that I did last week talking about my editing process. I had a few technical difficulties with that one, so for some reason it didn't save the video in Twitter, and it looked like a few of you were interested but weren't able to make it at the time, so I thought I'd just upload a new video here to YouTube. So, my editing process. So when I work with a client, usually I get sent a manuscript, obviously, and sometimes I get some more from a query package, so I might get a synopsis or a query letter. So my method is I like to go straight into the manuscript and I tend to look at the synopsis or whatever afterwards. This is because I like to get a nice clean look at the manuscript. I don't really want too many preconceived ideas about it or necessarily to know what the plot is going to do when. And the reason for this is I really subscribe to reader response theory. So reader response theory is something that I am going to be looking at in a lot more depth on my Patreon page. Sign up now! I'm also looking to produce a blog on that, but very briefly, it's an academic theory that believes that there is a kind of triangle when it comes to reading that consists of the author, the text, and the reader. So the author and the text don't necessarily have any say over what the reader is going to bring to the text or how they're going to interpret it, because the reader comes with their own baggage and their own ideas of what they're expecting and that kind of thing. So when I'm reading for editing, I tend to try and put myself in the reader's shoes. So I come at the book the same way that they do, I experience things hopefully in the same order that they do, and I try and really put myself in that reader's shoes, because at the end of the day, that's your consumer. That's the person who is going to hopefully be leaving you really good reviews and coming back to buy more of your books. So it's important to get their experience right and make sure that as much as possible their experience is what you want it to be. So, what do I actually do when I get a manuscript? My service is that I provide structural / story / oh, it's called something else as well. They can't decide what to call it, but it's the kind of editing that you have kind of early on. Sorry, I have a cat now as well. Here's a tail. It's the kind of editing where you're looking at the whole story and trying to make sure that it hangs together well. So you're making sure that the pacing is okay, all of the chapters kind of have their own thing that they're adding to the text, that the chapters are starting and ending in the right place, and that the characters that you have develop, and they develop in the way that you want them to. But as well as that, I also do line editing. Normally you would have two different editors for these two different things, but I like to do both because, to be honest, I find it much easier to think about the story and the characterization and all of that kind of thing if the text in front of me makes sense, and I don't really see the point in reading through sorry about this, of reading through a text and seeing the punctuation in that sentence is duff and just going, I've seen it, but I'll leave it there. Because, I mean, it doesn't take 2 seconds to go, no, that the full stop needs to be on the other side of that quote mark. So that's the way that I work. I go through step by step. I do my line edits. For those who don't know, line editing, you're looking at the kind of spelling, punctuation and grammar, which I think a lot of people think is what editors do, which is a really, really tiny part of what we do. So we're looking at the spelling, punctuation and grammar. We're also looking at the syntax. We're looking at how dialogue heavy something is, how narrative heavy it is. We're looking at, consistency. Making sure that if your character has blonde hair in the first chapter, they have blonde hair right the way through the book, all of that kind of thing. And just making sure that the details of your book work well. So when I'm editing, I look at big picture and small picture. So at this point, I've been right the way through the manuscript, and I've got a whole bunch of track changes on there. So that'll be both the line edits, correcting everything, making sure it all looks good, and also comments on specific bits, stuff that I don't think works. I use the word unnecessary a lot, so I'll delete stuff that absolutely definitely needs deleting, but a lot of the time... Hi, Wolfie. Hang on a sec. This is what I'm dealing with. This is Wolfie Cat. She's a pest. She's just been fed. There is no reason for her to be doing this. So yeah, unnecessary. There'll be a lot, I mean, as in it can be a quarter of a sentence or it can be 3 pages where I'll be like, this isn't really adding anything, but I don't want to delete it because at the end of the day it is the author's decision what they want in their book. So unnecessary gets used a lot. So what was I saying? Oh yeah, I put together the manuscript, and then what also goes out to my client is a kind of 5 to 7 page document, which is all of the notes that I've made in my notebook as I go along. So I look at 4 key areas. I look at story, which again is the pacing. I'll usually split it out into beginning, middle and end. You expect the beginning to be pretty tight, and I think a lot of that is because most writers edit from beginning to end, so the beginning tends to get the most focus on it, while the author is really into their editing and really keen on making sure that they've got what they want. So the beginning's usually pretty good. The middle is where it gets really ropey and is usually, especially second world fantasy, gets really exposition heavy. And it's where a lot of the problems happen. I talk a lot on Twitter about the chapter of doom, and every manuscript has one. And that's why I talk about it, because I want writers to know that every manuscript has one, but it'll be that one chapter that exemplifies everything that is wrong with your manuscript. If you have trouble not getting your exposition across in a particularly subtle way, it'll be full of exposition. If you have trouble where your entire book feels like it's delivered in 2-person conversation, that's what'll be in the chapter. And it's usually around chapter 10. It's been chapter 10 for a few of my manuscripts. But yeah, it'll be there, and it's a good thing for editors, because it does usually say, look, this is what's wrong. If you can fix this chapter and fix the things that are wrong with this chapter right the way through your manuscript, your work is going to be so much better for it. And it's really good to have a strong example of what's wrong to help someone put it right. And then a bit about the ending. So that will usually be, have you tied up everything? Do I feel like as a reader I know everything that I need to know by the ending? And also thinking about possible sequels and the kind of information that you might use to jump off onto that, because a lot of the work, a lot of the manuscripts that I work on are fantasy, sci-fi, young adult, where you're kind of almost expected to be writing as part of a series. So that's story. Next bit is character. In this section I'll go through each of the main characters and give them their own paragraph or couple of paragraphs. Also any other characters that kind of stood out for me, either as being particularly brilliant or terrible or maligned. There are so many characters that I come across who seem to be treated terribly for no reason, and I'm kind of like, this poor guy, why are you being so mean to him? But with the main characters, a lot of that is focusing on their story arc, whether I feel like their arc is good, whether they hang together well as a character, if they are too perfect, if they're too flawed, and kind of how that's expressed throughout the novel, and whether they have a decent arc, whether they develop through the story, which is what you really want from your main characters. The third section is style, so that's usually looking at how the story is written. In this section I'll go through usually problems that are there with the written style that happen throughout, like if you have trouble punctuating dialogue, which is a big one. If you're watching this, just go and check how you punctuate dialogue, because you would not believe how many people have trouble with that. But it'll also be if you're very dialogue heavy, if your narrative doesn't feel descriptive enough, if there are words or phrases that you absolutely love that you need to stop using because someone is going to kill you soon. All of that kind of thing comes under style. And then the last one I call substance, but in terms of what it actually covers, it's all of the ideological stuff, so to do with gender, race, homosexuality, ability, all of that kind of thing comes under here. And it's the stuff that usually either it'll be someone is trying to tackle it directly and do a thing with it, which is really cool, or it will be about whether you're embracing diversity in your work in a way that your reader is going to expect at this point. I think whether you're actually reflecting your readership, whether you're reflecting your reader's experience of the world, and if not, why not? Because I mean, it's absolutely fine to say women only make up 10% of the population in my world, but you need to think about that. And what does that mean? What does that mean for women? What does that mean for men? I talk about this in much greater detail in my Patreon video, Diversity 101. Support me on Patreon. Because it is something that people have difficulty with, I think, based on the manuscripts that I'm reading. You kind of have people who want to do something with diversity as part of their novel who are very aware, probably far more aware than I am, but for your average person just trying to write a manuscript and trying to make it reflective of the population, it's handy for that. So yeah, I send the manuscript back, I send that big sheet back, and if the author wants, I'm happy to have a Skype conversation with them for an hour or so just to go through everything or any particular questions that they have. That doesn't get taken up very often at all. Writers seem really happy to kind of have this big bulk of paper information and just go back into their little writing caves and deal with it on their own. But yeah, the offer is there. I'm more than happy to talk through things, to act as a sounding board. I say this again and again. Apologies. Yeah, for me, editing is not the kind of experience where I take your manuscript, I work on it, I give it back to you, and then I leave your life forever. I like to stay involved in projects. I really like to know how you're getting on. If you need someone to look over a query or a synopsis or something like that, I am more than happy to check that over. Yeah, I like to make sure that you're getting on okay. And I mean, if I've said this scene needs a lot of work or this chapter needs rewriting, I'm more than happy to bounce ideas around. Or if you've got a plot hole, to say, okay, well, here are some solutions. How does that work? What ideas have you got? Does that work? These are the problems that I have with it. Does it answer that issue? And yeah, I just like to stay involved. I like to think of my clients as coming into the family, and you never really get rid of that family. They're going to bother you forever and make sure that you're querying and doing fantastic things, because generally you deserve to be doing fantastic things. So that is the way that I edit. I hope that that's useful. If you've got any questions or anything like that, then you can get hold of me on Twitter. I am at vproofreader. I've mentioned Patreon a couple of times. If you do want to sign up and be a patron, you can find me at patreon.com/Vicky Brewster Editor. On there I am doing these kind of videos, so giving writing tips and editing tricks, and delivering workshops that I do at cons and stuff. I just do a little recorded version as well. So hopefully that's helpful. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye.